I think I need to get a box dye to cover up some of this. I don't like blonde on me, and it's bleached, but it looks blonde, so I think I need to get some box dye just to cover up what? Until the next time I cover. Welcome back to another video, guys. Today I'm going to be doing the review of Maud, which I lent the book out, so I just have the dust jacket, but I'm reviewing Maud by Melanie J. Fishburn for you guys today. I'm just going to set this down because it's awkward holding a dust jacket. So Maud was one of those surprising books of the end of summer for me, because I went all through summer batting back and forth if I was going to pick this book up or not. At one point at Chapters I was like, you know what, just pick it up and see how you like it. Just do it. So I did. And I loved it. I review it for you guys because I love to gush about this, and it gives you such a warm, great piece of Canadian culture. So without further ado, here is my review of Maud by Melanie J. Fishbane. Maud is a fictional account of the life of young Ella Montgomery, Lucy Maud Montgomery. Ella Montgomery is the author of the Anne of Green Gables series, which is loved throughout the world, and it's kind of our Canadian gem. We love talking about Anne of Green Gables, and whenever you talk about Canadian fiction, Anne of Green Gables is one of the first books that gets brought up. So there's not much to go on a synopsis. It's just really following the life of Ella Montgomery. There was a lot of research put into this. The author used a lot of Ella Montgomery's journals and kind of interpreted how she would be feeling in the moment of some of those things mentioned in the journals. So there was some fictional licenses taken to make the story flow, but a lot of the major events were taken from Maud's own journals, and then some of the feelings that she wrote in there as well. So I think it was really well done. You can tell a lot of research was put into this. There was a lot of research listed in the back, as well as some what happened to actual characters and some actual historical facts about the life of Ella Montgomery, which I really appreciate when you're reading kind of a fictional biography. The writing of this book was warm and enchanting, and it was almost like reading Anne of Green Gables, that kind of warm, whimsical feeling of just this young girl going through life, and I really enjoyed that. It reminded me a lot of Anne of Green Gables, and it made me want to pick up Anne of Green Gables again. I haven't read Anne since middle school, and I didn't even know it was an entire series until I hit BookTube, which looks bad on my part as a Canadian, but I grew up with like the stories and the ideas. There's a TV show on CBC I grew up called Road to Avonlea, which my family and I watched all the time, every time it was on. And that show, I believe, was based on Ella Montgomery's writing, and there was also an Emily of New Moon TV show as well, which I didn't watch as much, but it was connected to the Avonlea series. So you grew up with a lot of it in Canadian culture. There's not much to say about the characters because they're all real people or based on real people. It was just really good to see how Melanie incorporated a fictional aspect of bringing these characters to life instead of just reiterating their lives and what they went through. You really felt like the emotion of what Maud could be going through during those times, and also the characters and how they felt. So the characters are really brought to life and really well written and respected to their actual historical people. Now, what I really want to talk about in this book is just the Canadian culture, the Canadian warmth, and some of the Canadian representation. I loved this book because it was about Canada. And even though I've never been farther than Toronto and Ontario, I haven't been to the East Coast. I know nothing about it. I really want to. But I have lived all of my life in the prairies of Canada, and a lot of the prairies were mentioned because Maud does go to live with her father for a period of time in St. Albert, Saskatchewan. And I've been to St. Albert, Saskatchewan. I've lived in Saskatchewan. I've lived in Manitoba. I lived in the prairies all of my life, and both of those provinces were mentioned in this book. One of my favorite lines in the book was when Melanie described Winnipeg. I've lived in Winnipeg for a summer. I really, really love that city. If you ever visit Canada, I know it feels like not the hot spot in the world to go visit, but I adore Winnipeg. It's called the Chicago of the North, which kind of gives you the idea of what the architecture and the history is about Winnipeg, if you guys have an idea. If you guys ever want to make your way up north and visit our Chicago. It's also extremely windy, just like the real Chicago. So you got a lot of comparisons there. There was a quote in the book that just got me, and it actually made me super homesick for Winnipeg. And she just described how Winnipeg looked like somebody threw down some streets and some houses and forgot to sort them out. That is 110% accurate from the time I lived in Winnipeg. We even have an intersection in Winnipeg called Confusion Corner, and if you can navigate that, you are pro at driving in Winnipeg. And I navigated it once. I technically got lost, but I still could find my way out of it. so I considered myself semi-pro. But that was such an accurate description of Winnipeg and the prairies at that point that it made me super homesick for going back to Winnipeg, and I really enjoyed just feeling like I was reading about home. Also, when Maud pulled into Regina and then her trip from Regina up to Prince Albert, again, I've been through all of those towns. I recognized some of those Saskatchewan names, and I just felt like I was reading about home. It felt very home to me, even how she described Prince Albert at the time. I was like, I've been there, I have seen it. And even though I didn't see it at that point in history, you can see some of the remnants of it in our Canadian history and just when you visit those cities. The other thing that got me super excited about this as a Canadian book was proper Indigenous and Métis people representation. For those of you who don't know, my background and culture is French Métis, and who the Métis people are is when the French voyageurs and the fur trade came to that area of Canada, mostly Saskatchewan and Manitoba up by the Hudson's Bay, so they married into Indigenous tribes to kind of help with the trading and the politics of it. So they married Indigenous women, and thus the Métis people were born. And that it came with a whole culture. We have a whole different culture. We even have a language called Michif, which she mentions in the book, and I was so excited. And it was just exciting as a Métis person to read that and get proper representation. Now, she does use the term Indian in the books because historically at the time, that is what they refer to. She also uses the term half-breed because that is what the Métis were called up until even my grandpa's day, if not even longer past that. My grandfather dealt with a lot of racism in his life, and being called half-breed or dirty blood was unfortunately part of that. So having the term half-breed used in that historical setting, it was done very respectful. It was done to kind of give you an eye-opener to how the Indigenous people were treated at the time and how the Métis people were treated at the time. There was an actual character who was Métis, not just a mention of the Métis people. So you met a young Métis girl who was the hired girl for this family. She was working with this family to help her family, and also while working there, she did get to go to school for a little bit. So I really enjoyed having an actual character with an actual name who was a Métis person and who kind of told Maud a little bit about the Métis people. Ma had a respectful awe for the Métis people and for the Indigenous people that she met. She wished they had been treated better, as we kind of saw some of the treatment for them, because this was during, I think, getting close to the residential school time period with what John A. Macdonald was trying to enforce. So you started to see some of those, but it didn't touch on the main topics. But they did mention John A. Macdonald at some points in this book and some of the ideas of what he was wanting to do. I just really enjoyed all of that Canadian history, that Canadian culture that was brought into the story. And again, just having a Métis character was really exciting for me. I mean, I was excited when Rachel McMillan just mentioned the Métis people, but I found it just really exciting to be mentioned in a YA novel as well. So I highly recommend, if you guys want to read this and you're from the States, I do recommend you pick this up. You get a little bit of Canadian history that you might not have heard about in general. So along with that fantastic representation in the history of the Métis and Indigenous people of Canada, I just really enjoyed seeing that scope from Prince Albert to the east coast of just Canada in general, and just some of the things Maud has gone through. Maud went through a lot of difficult things in her life just to get where she wanted to go, and that was to be a writer and to go to school and to be a teacher in a time where it was really frowned upon, especially from being a Presbyterian background where it was definitely frowned upon for women to have a career. Basically just girls are meant to get married, and that was that. And she was from a small town, so her pickings were few, and that was not her dream. She even turned down love interests because she had a dream that did not include them. And at that point that she could not bring them along on this dream. And that I really appreciated that idea behind that. There was also a lot of other mentions with how women are treated during that history period of Maud having a lot of unwanted suitors and no one really helping her with this problem, and maybe even insinuating that she has done something to lead them on, even when she's sitting there thinking, what in the world could I have done to lead them on, to think that I had any interest in them? But it was all the blame went back to Maud in how she was maybe the blame to leading certain unwanted suitors on. So a lot of that treatment of women, Maud wanting to go to school or not wanting her to continue education or to get a career, and so just a lot of those things that she went through in her life. Overall, because of the writing, the representation, just the beauty and the flow of this book, I gave it a solid 5-star rating. probably one of my favorite books of the year. I just really enjoyed it. Even though there's not a lot of action or drama or anything to kind of pull your attention, just the beauty written of somebody's life and somebody's story. These fictional biographies are just really intriguing to me. So I really enjoyed reading this. And again, I'm just loving it as a Canadian, and I just want to recommend this as a great piece of Canadian fiction. So if you guys have any questions about the book Maud by Melanie J. Fishburn, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to answer any of those. Like I said, I highly recommend it. It is also a clean read. I can't think of anything that would have triggered any content, of course. It is a fictional biography, so I can't see anything being thrown in there for the sake of entertainment without staying true to the character. So I do guarantee it a clean, fun read and a must read for any Anne of Green Gables fan. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!